Hi, this is a video about how to hardwire a Grizzl-e Smart charger, or any of the Grizzl-e chargers. Unfortunately, I have to recommend that if you haven't purchased a Grizzl-e charger yet to hardwire it, don't. And the first part of this video is going to tell you why I am now saying that and recommending that. And then the next part of the video will actually show you how to do it if you already have a Grizzl-e charger or you are intent on hardwiring your Grizzl-e charger anyway. The primary issue with the charger is the interface between the conductors and the actual charger itself. And the reason that that's an issue is that inside the charger there are these slots where the conductors have to attach to the charger. And United Chargers has decided to use wire lugs. And there's nothing particularly wrong with wire lugs. However, because the slots that they have provided in their wire harness are 10 millimeters wide, there are very few 8-gauge wire lugs that will actually fit into those slots. And I encountered this problem when as I started to do my installation, and I had several back and forth conversations with the folks at United Chargers about this. And at first they guided me to these guys. These are Elecfun 8-gauge, what are they called? 10-6 8-gauge wire lugs, but they turn out not to fit. While it says on the Amazon site where these are sold that they're 10 millimeters wide, they're not. They're actually 12 millimeters wide. And so I ended up using an angle grinder to mill this down to fit. Then I talked to United Chargers again, and they said, we don't like that, that's not a good idea. Instead, use these other wire lugs. And they said, these are the wire lugs that we use on our equipment. So this is the NEMA 1450 plug that I took out of the charger. And it's hard to see in the video, but I'll see if we can get a close-up of it. These are the wire lugs that are attached to their conductors. However, when I bought those wire lugs from Amazon, those are from a company called UXCELL. Those turned out to be extremely thin and flimsy. And what I discovered, and what I finally got to the bottom of with the guys at United Chargers, is that they are using a 10-gauge wire lug for an 8-gauge conductor. However, what I discovered is that they're not the same. The ones that they're using on their conductors are thicker than the UXCELL ones that I got from Amazon. And so I don't know what they're doing. It looks like they somehow welded another piece of material on there. The bottom line is that it's difficult to get a piece of copper that is thick enough to carry the current that we need to carry for a 10 kilowatt charger in that wire lug. And I went with the solution of milling the edges of my Elecfun ones down, because those were 8-gauge wire lugs and they were thicker than the 10-gauge ones that were recommended by United Chargers. And I hope that that's going to work. I think it will. We've tried it and there's nothing caught on fire, nothing melted. But the bottom line is that if you're going to hardwire this and you don't have a solution for that problem, where you can get a 10 millimeter wide 8-gauge wire lug, it's probably better to go with a different product. And you can kind of understand that if you're in the business of making wire lugs and you make one that's designed for 10 gauge conductors, you're going to make it have enough material for the amount of current that can pass through a 10 gauge conductor. And if you're making 8 gauge ones, you're going to make it with more material because more current passes through those can pass through those conductors. And so it's not a surprise that the 8 gauge wire lugs are beefier than the 10 gauge ones. So that's the reason that I no longer support the idea of hardwiring this charger, even though that's what I did, because I already bought it and I own it and I saw this project through to the end. So if you are intent on hardwiring a Grizzl-e charger, go ahead, watch the rest of my video, and I'll show you how I did it. Otherwise, buy a product that is already set up for hardwiring. And I hope that the guys at United Chargers will redesign the wire harness on the inside of their product, because their product is otherwise a good one. It's a very solid product, and I would otherwise recommend it, but for hardwiring it just isn't set up for that, and there isn't really a good way to complete that interface as they've designed it. Hope that's helpful, and the rest of the video follows. I'm going to show you how I am hardwiring my Grizzl-e Smart charger. At my house, I don't have a garage, so I need to wire it outside, and I don't want to plug it into a NEMA 1450 plug outside. I want it to be hardwired. However, disclaimer time, I am not a licensed electrician. I am somebody who knows my way around electrical things, and so you should consider this video just for entertainment. All right, so there are lots and lots of videos about how to install this charger with an existing NEMA 1450 plug, and this is not one of those. You can find those all over the internet. This is about how to hardwire it. So the first thing that you need to contend with when you set out to hardwire this guy is the fact that the NEMA plug is installed through this conduit port. And the first thing you have to do is get this cable tension thing off. And what I found worked was taking the pliers and working it off. I just moved it back and forth and slid it off this way, and eventually was able to slide it off of the conductors like that. So that's the first thing that you have to contend with. Then, once you've taken this out, the next thing is your incoming conductors have to fit into these slots. And these slots are 10.2 millimeters wide. And what that means, let me see if I can get you a better view of this. What that means is I was not able to find a wire lug for 8 gauge wire that was 10 millimeters wide. There are lots of them, and they all seem to be about 12.5 millimeters wide. Ultimately, what I did is I bought some from Amazon that claimed to be 10 millimeters wide, and they weren't. They were 12 millimeters wide. So I used my angle grinder to take off some material, and I was able to get it down to 10 millimeters. I'll crimp those lugs onto the wires with this. I was actually going to use a lot of conduit plumbing to get this 1 inch down to the 3/4 inch and get it all working. But it turns out plugging that 3/4 conduit right into this fixture is what worked for me. This is the wire lug that I bought from Amazon that claimed to be 10 millimeters wide, and it isn't. It's about 12, and you can see that it doesn't fit into the slot where the wires need to attach to the charger. So what I did is I used my angle grinder to take off a little bit of material so that this would fit. And I simply, the way I did that with eye and ear protection is I just put it into a standard pliers, and that allowed me to hold it steady against the angle grinder. And it didn't take very long. The way I ended up doing it after I did the first couple and I took off too much material. So what I ended up doing was doing a couple seconds with the angle grinder and then putting it up against a ruler and repeating that process until I got it to the size I needed it to be. So now I have 3 of these things that are the right size. If you can find 10 millimeter ones, I mean, our friends at United Chargers found them, but they're getting them from Canada or China or somewhere. I don't know where they're getting them from, but I wish they would just include 3 of them in the box so that we could do this hardwiring job ourselves without having to go to all this trouble. So that's the story on those guys. Here's the finished install. As you can see, I don't have a garage, so I had to mount this right in my driveway. How I routed the conductors is I routed them through this 3/4 inch non-metallic flexible conduit. And that goes all the way underneath the house, which is a very small crawl space, which is one of the reasons I used that NEMA conduit, and lands here at my electrical panel. It comes up through that little utility box there. And what I'm running is 2 8-gauge conductors for L1 and L2, and then a 10-gauge for the ground. And that lands on a 50-amp breaker in the panel. I did not use a GFCI breaker because the charger has a GFCI in it, and 2 of them often don't play well together. One little thing is that this ground wire, this 10-gauge ground wire, you need a different crimper, or I needed a different crimper to get that cable lug onto it. Make sure that you torque your conductors when you land them in your panel and in the Grizzl-e. There are torque settings on the side of the breaker and in the manual for the Grizzl-e. If you don't have a torque screwdriver, you should buy one for this project. I feel much better knowing that my conductors are properly torqued and that they're not going to be generating excess heat because they're a little bit too loose or a little bit too tight. The other thing is, this is the holster that they supply with the unit. It is useless for storing the cable. The cable just falls off of it. And also, when the cable is on it, you don't have access to this lock. And because my charger is out in the open, I need to lock up the charger, whatever you call this thing, the charger cable so that people can't show up in the middle of the night and harvest energy from us. So if the cable's sitting on top of here, you can't access this lock without taking the cable off and like dumping it on the ground. So I just put up this garden hose holder, and it seems to work much better. The other thing I wanted to show you is that 3/4 inch flexible conduit goes right into this connector here that was where the NEMA 1450 plug was, and it just fit. I mean, you can see it's not perfect, but it's watertight, and it holds onto it quite solidly. Obviously, this conduit is a little bit bigger than this cable, but in my world, it fits, it works. I'm pretty happy with that. And this is just drilled into the concrete. That was a lot of fun. So there you go. That's the finished install. Thanks for watching.